Hi folks, it's the General here with episode 8 of my 59th minute FPL podcast. I'm recording on the 3rd of August, Friday evening, so we're 1 week away now from the season kicking off. We'll be sweating this time next week as the deadline approaches. So it's good to be back. Good to be back sitting in front of the microphone again. It doesn't seem that long ago that I did the last one for game week 38 last season, so time flies by. So I've had a pretty busy summer, as most of you know, getting married and going on honeymoon, so it was a nice break from all things FPL. Just got back online properly yesterday, so I'm going to spend the weekend catching up on everything I've missed, podcasts, articles, things like that. Haven't done any tinkering yet whatsoever. I've still got an auto-picked side, so I've got a week now to get things together. This podcast, I'm gonna get a podcast out tonight, and then I'm gonna probably do another one on Tuesday night, and then from then on for the rest of the season, it'll probably be every Tuesday night then that I'll get a podcast out. So this one's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be I'm going to talk about 11 tips for FPL success. My initial title was 10 tips for FPL success, but then I realised that the good guys over at Hail Cheaters, Always Cheating, they released a podcast recently titled 10 Tips for FPL Success, so I said I better go one better and do 11. But I would recommend listening to that one as well. It's very good, and a great bunch of lads. I actually met Brandon in Glasgow just before I went on honeymoon 2 weeks ago, so hit them guys up as well. A really good podcast, one of my favourites. So as I said, this podcast is going to be going to share some of my wisdom, which has helped me to 3 top 500 finishes in the last 4 years. As I say, podcasts from then on will be every Tuesday. I am going to get on YouTube as well this season. It's going to be a pretty busy week for me next week. As I said, I'm already kind of chasing my tail, trying to catch up on things. So I probably won't get on YouTube next week, but I would like to get on from game week 2 onwards. And the idea would be every Friday night to do a live stream about 9 PM UK time. So keep your eyes out for that as well, and I'll keep you up to date on Twitter with any developments there. I'm going to just jump straight into it. So as I said, I've got 11 tips here for FPL success. These are the things that I think have helped me to have my 3 very good seasons over the last couple of years. Now, you might not agree with every one of them, but these are the things that have helped me, and I hope you find some of them useful as we head into the new season. I haven't done a great deal of planning for this pod. I've just jotted down 1 to 11 on a piece of paper, and I'm just going to expand on each point a wee bit. Podcast should be around half an hour, hopefully not too much more than that. Number 1, you got to be patient playing FPL. Straight up with transfers, just wait for Friday. Wait for Friday. Get all the information that you can before you make your final decision for your team for the weekend. We often get information on Thursdays and Fridays from managers and press conferences and things like that, or late injuries or illnesses and things like that. And it's just pointless making early transfers without having all the knowledge that you need for the weekend. So more often than not, I think last season I would say 90-95% of the time, I didn't make any transfers until Friday night or even sometimes on a Saturday morning. As I said, you're just waiting for all the information, gathering all the information all week, whether it be on Twitter, on Reddit, things like that, and just listening to sports news and what managers are saying and things like that. Patience as well. You got to be patient when you have a bad game week. I think that's a big one. It's very easy to knee jerk and think you need to act right away after having a bad game week. I know what it can be like on a Sunday evening if things have just gone really badly and you're sitting on 25-30 points, but the best thing to do in that scenario is just log out of the site and just don't log in for a couple of days, because if you do and you're in a bad mood with what's happened at the weekend, you might end up making early transfers, which is never really a good idea. About it for a couple of days, and don't let one bad game week, it's only one game week out of 38, and we all have bad game weeks, so you just got to be patient and just take the bad ones on the chin, and don't make any rash decisions on Sunday nights or even on Mondays. So just patience is number 1. That's the first thing I've written down. I was going to say something else about patience as well. It'll come back to me. I'm just going to move on to the second tip, which is make your own decisions. It's your team. This is, I think, more so than ever now. It's probably one of the hardest things to do in FPL, especially if you're online, you're on Twitter and Reddit and things like that. There's so much information out there now, and I mean, there's so much good information. But I think you can overdo it as well. You can read into too many articles and listen to too many podcasts and things like that, and maybe it clouds your own judgment then about what you want to do with your team. So something I've been good at over the past couple of years is when it comes to Friday evening. Obviously, I've taken all the information on board all week, and I've kind of making up ideas in my head about what I want to do. But then I'll just shut everything off, and I'll just sit down for half an hour or an hour and just look at my own team and look at nothing else, and just think what's the best decision for me. And I'll avoid kind of. It's very easy, especially on Twitter, in the FPL community. We think that Twitter is the be all and end all, but in reality, it's a very, very small percentage of the amount of people that play FPL overall. So sometimes you see everyone on Twitter getting a certain player, and you think, right, I need to get that player as well. But you do need to remember there's a very small on Twitter who play the game. So make the decisions that you want to make for your team. Don't always follow the crowd. Don't be afraid to be different, because I mean, following the herd in certain circumstances, yes, can be a good thing. Maybe, for example, with Salah this season, game week 1, he's going to be so highly owned. So maybe the smart play might be to just get him in and see what happens after a couple of weeks then. But as the season goes on, really following the herd, you're not going to make any gains. So don't be afraid to be different and make the decisions that you want to make, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to get you ahead of the herd if they pay off. So that's number 2. Make your own decisions. It's your team. Number 3, something I think that has helped me is avoiding points hits. I take very few points hits. I make very few transfers altogether over the course of the season. Last season, I finished 362nd overall. It was last season, and I only took 38. I only made 38 transfers last season, so on average 1 a week. And when it came to points hits last season, I think I took 2 -4s and I took 1 -8. So that gives you an idea of how I play the game. And I think the key to avoiding points hits is good squad management. So in every decision you make, you're kind of thinking long term about the balance of your squad. So squad management, can help you to make less transfers. Some examples of that, like when it comes now to game week 1 next week, I'll be picking players, tried and trusted FPL players. I won't take too many risks. I won't bring in any players who I know may lose their place after a couple of weeks, because to me that's a precious transfer that I don't need to use. So an example of that maybe would be Luke Shaw at United. There's a lot of people talking about Luke Shaw. He's going to play the first couple of games. Obviously that could be great. He's only 5 million. But I would expect, Ashley Young to come straight back in then at left back. So then you're going to be forced into a transfer. You're going to have to get rid of Luke Shaw. So those kind of scenarios, I just don't even go for him in the first place, because the way I see it is that's a transfer I'm booking in for myself. And even though it's only one transfer out of say 38 or 40, every transfer is precious to me. And I mean, when it comes to the week where I want to get rid of Luke Shaw, there's probably a more exciting transfer that I would want to make, maybe in midfielder attack. And because I need to get rid of Shaw, maybe it won't allow me to get a more exciting player, the more exciting strikers and midfielders. So that's one way how I minimise my transfers. I don't bring in players who I know I'm going to have to sell 3 or 4 weeks later. I just don't think it's really worth it, because I do see every transfer as precious. And again, game week 1, nailed on players, tried and trusted FPL players. They're the players I'm going to be looking at bringing in. The players I know that 100% are going to play in game week 1 and going forward as well, who should be nailed on for the season. Another thing I do usually game week 1, I very rarely bring in players from the promoted sides. I usually just one, because I usually don't know an awful lot about the promoted sides because I don't watch the championship, but I kind of just let them settle in and see how things how things go with them, and then maybe bring them in 3 or 4 weeks in if they do hit the ground running and they are making an impression. But I don't like bringing in the championship players who've come up from the championship, because they probably haven't played in the Premier League, and you don't know how a player's going to adjust. I mean, a player can easily score 25, 30 goals in the championship, and then he could struggle to get 10 in the Premier League. It's just a completely different ball game. So that's another thing I do to help balance my squad management. There's a lot of different ways you can manage your squad as well, which helps to minimise transfer. So I often see managers who maybe invest a lot of money in their starting 11, and then some of the bench players might not play. They might have 2 players, 4 million or 4.5 million on their bench who don't even play, and I just think that's never really a good idea. I always aim to have 15 players who play, because there will be times in the season where you need your bench, and even sometimes it goes all the way you need your third bench player. I remember last season I had Lewis Dunk at one point, and he was my third sub, and two of my defenders didn't play, and I ended up, my third sub came in, Dunk came in, and he got me 10 points. So that's another example of, people were saying, oh, that's lucky, you got 10 points from your third sub. But I wouldn't say it's lucky, I say it's good squad management, because I knew all 3 players on my bench played, and if I needed them to come in, that there's a possibility of them doing something. Whereas in that scenario, if I had a third, my 5th defender was a 4 million defender who wasn't playing, then obviously I was going to get 0 points that week from a third bench player. So there's lots of different ways you can manage your squad well to help you avoid points hits. But again, as I say, these tips I'm giving are not every one of them is going to sit well with everyone. There's a lot of managers who play very aggressively and take a lot of points hits. Some of the best managers in the world are very aggressive, and it can work for some people. But obviously, in my case, 3 seasons in the top 500, and I've taken around 40 transfers or less. It's very easy for me to just stick to my tried and trusted strategy. But again, that doesn't mean it's the only way to play the game. You've got to play the game the way you want to play it, and if that's taking hits, then go for it. I'll move on to tip number 4, which is don't obsess over team value. I know a lot of managers are, they like to build their team value by making early transfers with the view of later in the season having more cash to spend on transfers and things like that. Something I've never done. Again, it kind of ties in with leaving with the patience one, waiting until Friday to make your transfers. I'm never too worried about price rises and price falls. I'm quite happy to take a price fall on a player or two during the week, just to have all the information I want for the weekend, to make my transfers. I think I don't have it written down here, but off the top of my head, last season my team value was probably around 104 at the end of the season, so not very high, and it's been like that for the last couple of seasons. It's something I rarely, I do keep an eye on the price changes, and there's 2 websites I'm going to mention as well that you should keep an eye on for the price changes. Fantasy Football Fix is number 1, and then the other one I use is FPL Statistics. So I do tend to keep an eye on those 2, but it's mainly for things like if I have a transfer in mind for the weekend, and it's Tuesday or Wednesday, and I know that to make that transfer, when I do it, that I'll only have I'll have 0.0 in my bank then. And if either or rises or falls, that I'm not going to be able to make the transfer. That's the only time really I use the price changes to make an early transfer. If it's a player I 100% want to get in, and I need to act early because they could price me out, that's the only time I would make an early transfer. And again, with early transfers, if I'm bringing in a player, I want to make sure that he's not playing any European games or cup games during the week as well, because it's just too risky to bring in a player if they've got a game during the week where they could get injured in or suspended. So that's the thing. That's tip number 4. Don't keep an eye on the price changes, but don't obsess over your team value. Tip number 5. This is something I've done over the past few years, and I think it's very helpful. It's maintaining a watch list on the FPL website. So on the FPL website, you can create a watch list. So what I do every week is, first of all, going into game week 1 now, I'll have quite a big watch list. There'll probably be about 50 players on it, 50 or 60 players that that are in the running for my game week 1 team. And then as game week 1, game week 2, game week 3 rolls around, after each game week I jump into my watch list and I update it. So what I do is I'll go through each of the 20 Premier League teams on the FPL website, and the players that I'm interested in, who are playing well, who are scoring the points, I'll add them to my watch list. And then on the other hand, the players who I've got on my watch list, if I'm no longer interested in them, or if they picked up an injury or a suspension, I'll just remove them from my watch list then. So when it comes to Friday then, and when I'm going to make my transfers, rather than having to scroll through all the teams and players on the site, I just jump into my watch list where there's 25, 30, 35 players, whatever it is, and they're the core players that I'm interested in, and that's where I'll make my transfers from. So I just find that very useful. I don't know if a lot of people do that, or is that just me, but I do think having a watch list and updating it weekly, it can help. Especially it saves time for one. When it comes to a Friday, you've got your watch list, you've got the players you're interested in, and they're all in one place. But I do think it is a good idea. Tip number 6 is the eye test. So the eye test has always been number 1 for me. And when I say eye test, it means picking a player based on what I've seen from watching a full 90-minute match, as opposed to maybe looking at stats and just match of the day and things like that. I've been quite lucky over the last couple of years that I've been able to watch an awful lot of football, watch as many 90 minutes of the Premier League games as I can, because match of the day is great, but it is just a very small portion of the game, and you don't see things that you would see when you watch the game. So I would tend to try and I usually get 3 or 4 games every weekend, and I'll watch 90 minutes of it. And what I'll do when I'm watching the game as well, I'll just switch off Twitter and I'll put my phone down and I'll watch it, because I think nowadays we're all on the mobile phones, and you can easily just get distracted from the game, and then you're going to miss things. But eye test has always been number 1 for me. Again, there's so many stats out there and articles, and you can go deep into them, but I think there's nothing better than just watching a game 90 minutes and judging players for yourself. You're almost when I'm watching a Premier League game now, I watch it much differently than I did 10 years ago when I was younger. When I watch a Premier League game, I'm analysing everything with my FPL glasses on. I'm basically scouting for players for my own team. And what I find with watching a game as opposed to maybe match of the day, you'll see certain scenarios that you won't see on match of the day. There might be a striker going through on goal, and he blasts it wide, but if you had you might see a player to the left or to the right of him, and he could have played him in and he would have got a goal. So I'll be thinking, right, that player's getting into good positions. If only his striker laid it off to him, there you go, 6 FPL points or whatever it is. Again, with watching a game in 90 minutes, set pieces, you get to see what teams are doing with set pieces, what players are targeting again and again for set pieces, so you can factor that into your decisions then as well. I've had this debate quite a few times on Twitter with people saying, I always say, watch as much football as you can, it'll give you an edge, and some people will argue that you actually don't need to watch any Premier League games to do well in FPL, and that is true as well. You can do well from just looking at the stats and things like that, but for sure in my case, I know for a fact that if I hadn't watched as much football as I have done over the last couple of years, that I wouldn't have the FPL ranks that I have. I just think that watching the games really can give you an edge, and it just tells you learn things that you won't see in the stats or you won't see on match of the day. So that's tip number 6, the eye test. Watch as much as you can, even if it means I do it sometimes. If I'm not going to see a game, I'll just record it. Even if I know the score, I'll just watch back. I'll watch the 90 minutes back to see what I can take out of it for my FPL plans. Tip number 7 is plan ahead. So you've got to look ahead with every decision you make. There's no point bringing in a player. Bringing in a player for, just for example, if he's playing for Huddersfield, he's banging form, and if he's playing someone like Cardiff next week, there's no point bringing him in if he's got Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool, Spurs in his next 4 games. So don't just look ahead to the next game week. Look 4, 5, 6 weeks ahead, and base that on then, is it worth bringing in that player for, you know, for the next couple of weeks. Plan ahead as well. Later in the season, it's more important when it comes to, you know, blank game weeks and double game weeks. You've got to know what's coming around the corner, and you've got to be prepared for that. So that's quite an easy one, quite a straightforward one. Just plan ahead with every decision you make. Look ahead to the fixtures and make sure you know what's coming up. Tip number 8 is be flexible. Be flexible and be open to new ideas. So with FPL, every season is different, so you kind of got to feel the season out for the first few weeks and you know, see how things are shaping up. You kind of almost got to forget about everything that happened last season and it's just like a clean slate. You're going to have different players and different teams performing, you know, better and worse than last season. Obviously, we know there are tried and trusted FPL players, but when it comes to the season in general, you know, every FPL season does differ, and you just kind of got to feel it out. And that's why I would say be flexible. You know, after the first couple of weeks, you'll kind of get an idea of which teams and players are kind of going to be to the fore. So you know, don't be set in stone in your plans or your strategy. You got to kind of be flexible. And I guess the flexibility as well could be with, you know, formation. I was always a big man for 3-4-3. I never ever, you know, I was always 3-4-3. I never tried any other formations. But then in the last maybe 2 or 3 seasons, I've been more flexible and more open to new ideas. And I ended up playing 3-5-2 quite a lot. So you kind of got to, you know, some seasons you'll have all the midfielders are firing. Maybe this season we'll have all the strikers firing, and you know, that'll kind of determine your formation then. So don't go into the season saying, like, I get questions on Twitter, what formation are you going to play this season? And you just can't answer that because we don't know what players or what positions you're going to be to the fore. So you've got to be flexible. The best way to do that is to have a balanced squad where you can kind of, I know probably second half of last season I was kind of going between 3-4-3 and 3-5-2. So don't be too set in stone on your formation. So there may come a point in the season where you need to adjust things there. With that tip of being flexible and open to new ideas, again, don't be stubborn. It's very easy to be stubborn in FPL, especially with certain players and teams. If certain players troll you over and over again, it's going to be very hard to get them back in. You're going to have a hatred towards him, and I have that with. Thankfully, he's gone from the league now, Diego Costa, and I had Hazard last season as well. But I mean, if Hazard's still in the Premier League when next week rolls around, I mean, I just got to forget about all that. And as I say, it's a clean slate every season with every team and every player. So you can't be stubborn like that. I remember one instance when Leicester won the league. Jamie Vardy was banging in the goals all season, and I was very, very stubborn. I just had it in my head that, you know what, he's not going to keep it going. Surely the goals are going to dry up soon, but they didn't. And I was very, very stubborn, and I didn't get him in at all. It was actually my best ever season, but that was one thing I remember about that season, was refusing to get Jamie Vardy just out of pure stubbornness. And I think that's very important with FPL. You can't be stubborn. If a player's firing, even if you don't like him, you just got to get on him. Tip number 9, be boring. Again, the way I play the game, it's not very exciting. It is very boring. You know, I wait till Friday. I don't take points hits. I make the obvious moves, get the obvious players, but it's effective. It's been very effective for me. Be boring, make the obvious moves. Don't try to be too clever. That's all I really have to say about that one. I hear it a lot on podcasts and articles, things like that. You know, the best managers in the world, they often mention the word boring. Yes, it's a game, and we would love it to be exciting, but for me, to be effective and to get a good rank, you've got to be boring. Number 10, you have to forget about your allegiances when it comes to FPL. So I'm a Man U fan, but when it comes to managing my FPL team and making transfers, I just have to forget about that. I very often see that on Twitter. You know, people send me rate my teams, and you can almost guess which team they support by just looking at the players. You know, you'll get a Spurs fan and they'll have 3 Spurs players, or West Ham, they'll have 2 or 3 West Ham players. You got to put that aside with FPL. as I said, I'm a Man U fan, and I've had very few United players in my team over the last couple of seasons. And looking at it again this season for game week 1, I'd say I'm probably only going to have one max, which is probably going to be a defensive player, because I really hate Mourinho. People all know that from following me on Twitter. I really don't like the man. But he's a very defensively minded coach, and United just aren't the attacking force we used to be. We don't play exciting, open, expansive football. And when it comes to FPL and Man United in particular, you got to be looking at their goalkeeper or their defence. So that's point number 10. Forget about your allegiances. Put them aside when you're making your FPL decisions. Last tip, number 11. Have fun. Don't take the game too seriously. This is probably one of the hardest things to do, is not take the game too seriously, and I have definitely been guilty of this over the last couple of seasons. I was a lot better last season, actually, not taking the game too seriously. If I have a bad game week, I was kind of better last season at not letting it get to me or affect my mood. If you take the game too seriously and you do let it frustrate you, you're more likely then to make rash decisions. I think that's the big one. If you can just enjoy the game and just take the bad game weeks on the chin and just log out of the site for a couple of days and come back when you've calmed down, that is a big one as well. Just have fun. It is a game at the end of the day, so don't let it affect your emotions too much. So that's it. 11 tips for FPL success. Hopefully you found some of them useful. Let me know what you think as well. If there's any you don't agree with or different opinions, send me a tweet at FPL General on Twitter, and I'll get back to some of those as well. I'm always interested to hear the thoughts of others as well about the podcast. Before I wrap things up, just a reminder, I'll be back on most likely Tuesday with another podcast before game week 1. In that podcast, I'll look at players and teams for game week 1, and I'll give you an idea of what my thoughts are and what my team's going to look like for game week 1. What else was I going to say before I go? In relation to this podcast, I had thought about it during the summer, maybe expanding it to get guests on. But the more I thought about it, I kind of like doing a solo one. It kind of makes it different from the others, and it's just easier for me as well. You know, I just record this now and I upload it. I don't do any editing, so it doesn't take up any of my time, and I can do it whenever I want. I don't have to organise getting guests on and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do this season is I am going to keep it a solo podcast every Tuesday. Try to keep it short, about half an hour, because I know you don't want to listen to me for too much longer than that. And what I'll do then is I'll continue doing guest appearances on the other podcasts. That's another reason why I didn't, expand this one. There's just so many really good podcasts out there already that I listen to, and I just didn't want to really add another one into the mix. So my podcast will be a solo podcast. It'll be nice and short, to the point, every Tuesday. And as I said, I'm hoping to get on YouTube then on Friday nights for maybe live streams about 1 hour long. As I said, probably won't get one next week, but I will try and do some kind of live stream next week, whether it be on Periscope or even on YouTube or something like that. But keep an eye on Twitter for that. As I say, I'll be back on Tuesday. Those of you who follow me on social media as well might be aware that I've set up a Patreon for this season as well. So all the details about that, you can find them at patreon.com/FPL General. And again, any questions you have about that, just send me a message on Twitter, or you can send me an email at thefplgeneral@gmail.com. So that's me. Friday night, I'm off to do a bit of tinkering now, because as I said, my team's still an auto-picked side. I've got a lot of catching up to do, having been away for the last couple of weeks. So by the time Tuesday rolls around, I'll be able to give you a lot more insight into what I'm doing for the season ahead. Enjoy your weekend. Try not to fry your brain too much with the tinkering. I would actually just say wait until after the Community Shield on Sunday, and then start your tinkering, because I think that's going to tell us a lot. Man City and Chelsea, definitely two teams I'm looking at. If getting maybe at least 2 players from each side for game week 1. So we're lucky that it's those two sides that are in the Community Shield, so we can get a bit of insight into maybe how they're going to set up for the season ahead. But knowing Pep Guardiola, he'll just troll us. the team he plays on Sunday, he'll change it all around then next weekend. But looking forward to that on Sunday. So as I say, enjoy your weekend, and I'll be back on Tuesday with another episode.